Hey y'all, Billy Thomas here. In today's video, we're going to take a look at doing SQL nested queries, and not just how to do them, but why you might need them. Let's get to work. First of all, what is a nested query? A nested query is just a query of a query. All right. And why do we do it? It's really because we can't get the job done. We can't answer the question from the data with just one query. And we're going to demonstrate that today. I'm going to show you using a very simple data set, which we have right here. Just 14 rows of name, state, and sales. So we're going to walk through step by step and answer some questions about the data that a business person might ask us to understand. Or maybe you're trying to understand this about your own company. Now, when we look at this data set, we're going to ask the data some questions. We're going to say, what's the average sale? We're going to say, what's the average sale by person? What's the average sale by state? And then what is the average of a person and state, right? So an average of an average, okay? And so I've got 4 tabs on this spreadsheet. And by the way, I'm going to give you a link in the video comments down here below so that you can download both the spreadsheet and the SQL code that might help you in working on this issue. But in this spreadsheet, you've got 4 tabs. You've got the data. And then if you look over here, these are the questions that we're going to get answers to. What is the average sale? We've got a number. And look how different, depending on the way that we interrogate the data, we get such different answers. Just overall average sales, 167-ish. If we look at it by name, we get an average of about 164. If we look at it by state, we're down to 145 and a half. And if we look at by person and then state, it's 136. Now, if you go through the spreadsheet and look at it, I've kind of color coded to help you wrap your mind around why these answers are so different. Because I think this is always helpful, and I'll do this. I'll actually put data in a spreadsheet when I get asked a question. I'll do some sample data so I can try to understand what the answer should be before I ever get into SQL and start running queries. So when I look at this, the first one's by name. So each name has a color, has numbers, and then there's an average for each name. So, Bill has an average sale of 447, John 97, so on and so forth. But then we take the average of 447, 98, 74, 103, and 97, and we get 163.85. And notice the count, right? If we're doing an average on sales, we're looking at 14 rows. If we're looking at an average by name, we're only looking at 5 numbers, right? Because there's 5 names. Move over to state. If we color code by state here, you see 1, 2, 3, 4 different colors, 4 different count of averages. So South Carolina would be these 5 records, these 3 and these 2. And then Georgia's these 2, Ohio's these 4, and Florida these 3 for an average of 145.48. And the last tab here we got to look at is this by name and state. And if we look at this guy, we see, I had to get kind of creative with the color coding because I just chose to do just one name and state so you could kind of follow it through. But if you look at this first color is this blue here, and it's averaging up sales for Bill. The second one, which is by state, is actually looking at everything for South Carolina. So it's Bill and Jim. And if you double click it, you can see the formula. So it's averaging these numbers and these numbers. All right. So it's all of that. And then by name and state is actually going out and it's going to get these 2 numbers, the 447 and the 795. And so that's how this is going to work together, right? So we're going to go next into SQL Server and we're going to see exactly how to query this data to get these same numbers. And here's my table in SQL Server. So if I right mouse click on this guy and just hit select, we can see the data is represented in SQL Server the same way it is in Excel. So we've got our data here and we're ready to go. All right, let's ask the first question. So the first question is, what is the average of that data? So again, bringing it back up here, and I say, okay, I want to know the average. What's the average sales order for this data? So all we have to do, and again, so you don't have to watch me type, I've got it in here. We just say select average sales as average sales from sales. So if I run this, I get 166.92.85. Let's check it out. 166.92 if you round it up 9. All right, so that's average sales. The next question is average by name. Let's do that. So again, I've got it over here already. Let me grab it and do this. Average sales by name and bring it back over here. And now let's say we want to see select average or select the name, then average sales as average sales from sales group by name. All right. Now, if we execute this, it's going to take name and it's going to average it and group it by name. So we get boom, 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 boom. We get an average sale by name. And again, if we look at the spreadsheet, that's going to be this number here, the 447, the 97, and maybe I can put it over so you can see it. That's this number. But here's where the nested query comes in. Let's say I wanted to see the average of these numbers, right? Not the average of all the sales orders. I want to see the average of these numbers. How do I do that? Well, here's the secret sauce. What I do is I take this same query and we start off by just pasting it into query editor. And let me show you the very basics of a nested query. Select star from, and then a parenthesis, your select statement, and a parenthesis. That is almost it. We got one more thing we need to do. We need to give this a name. We need an alias for this nested query. So we're going to say that this is going to be called average, let me see if average sales and name. Okay. Now, if I run this guy, it just does exactly what I told it to, which was select everything from this other query. We've not told it to do anything, even though we've nested it, we've not told it to do anything else except select everything from the query we already created. Here's what the secret sauce is. If we now say select the average of this guy, average sales, paste it in there. So if we select the average sales from this query we already built and execute that, now we get 163.85. Check it out. Over here, 163.85. So in order to get to that answer, we had to do a nested query. The first level was this guy. There's our average by name. Now we take the average of the averages. We've got to do a nested query. So we took this guy, we put it in brackets, gave it an alias, and then we did select average, or select the name average sales, and we ran it. And if we run both of them, we've got this guy here is the average by name, and then the average of the average by name is 163.85. It goes on, so on and so forth through each one of these. So let me do the next one here, which is by state. And again, just to save you from having to see me type, right? There's no value in that. Let me put this guy in here, and then I'll walk you through it. So step one is, let's look at it by state. So if we do that, we literally go select state and the average sales as average sales from sales group by state. And if we run that, we get a aggregate function average by state. So we get 4 records, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, and South Carolina, because in our spreadsheet, we have 4 different states representatives. So if we flip over here, we've got South Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, and Florida. And then you can see the numbers again here, the 103, the 97, it's the matching game, 94.25 and 307.2. Here's where the nested comes in. I want an average of the average. And remember, you can't just say, give me the average sales, because that's a different number. This is an average of these 4 records. So I've got it typed out here, but let me show you building it again. I take this guy and what I do is I say select star from, and then I do a bracket, and I put my nested query in the middle of it. Now, this is all basically the nested query with nothing but our original query in it. What are we going to do with this? Well, we want to average sales. So we just come up here and we put in average sales. Oops, hit the wrong button. And we run that and check it. Oh, now this is good. So I can show you. Let's see, select average sales. We got a syntax error. What did we do wrong? Select, oh, I didn't give it an alias. So that's what I've got to do. I've got to come in here and say this is going to be average sales by state. And now let's run it. Okay, so again, I don't edit out when we have errors because you're going to get them. And I wanted you to see, even when I did it the first time, I remembered I've got to alias this nested query. The second time, I forgot to alias it. It gave me the error, but that's what it is. So now 145, 48, 75, 145, and again, we get just a little bit of rounding here, but we've got the same number here. And then finally, all right, so we've gone through the two tabs. We've seen the average, we've seen it by name, we've seen it by state. Now, how do we get by person by state? Well, we got to start it. We got to start by breaking it down. Let me clear this out one step at a time. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with this guy, which we want to pull over here and run. So this is the average by person. All right. So we've got this guy, which says, okay, here's Sally, John, Sue, Bill, and Jim. And they have the state in here, but it's an average by person so far. The next thing we want to do is we want to come in here and we're going to nest that, and we're going to nest it so that we get it by state. All right, so let's work on this together. So we take our original query, this guy right here, and we're going to paste it in here. Now let's set up our select star from, there's the bracket, drop down here, and another bracket. And now we want to say, we want to name this. This is going to be sales by name and state. Now, what I have to do is I have to come up here and say, what are we going to group this by? Well, we're going to group this by, we're going to say state. We're going to select the state, and then we're going to do the average of the average sales. All right, let's do that much and see how we're doing here. Okay, again, we've got an error, but it says column sales by name dot state is invalid because it's not in the aggregate group by. Well, now that we're doing an aggregate group by, we've got to go group by state. All right, now let's run it. Okay, now we've got 103, 97, 74, and 272. And if we look at it here, that is going to be this number right here, or these numbers. So 74, 25, 97, 50, 272, 25, and 103. Now, okay, so we've got it nested twice here. What happens if we want to nest it again? All right, well, let's do what we've done each time, which is we take our SQL, we copy and paste it. We do a select star from left bracket, we paste it in, and then we do a right bracket and we give it an alias. So let's call this sales by name state summary. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to say select the average of this is going to be, I gotta run it here to see what I aliased it as. Okay, I didn't alias it. That's the problem. So I gotta put an alias on here of average sales. Let me make sure that that runs. Okay, now see how the column is aliased? I need that alias to be able to use it in my query. So if I go here and I say right here, this is going to be as average sales. And then I can come over here and say select average of the average sales. Now, if I run all of this, execute. Oop, I didn't get it all. Didn't highlight it all. Now execute. 136.75. And there we are, 136.75. I know that this can be somewhat confusing, but that's why I'm giving you the spreadsheet. That's why I'm giving you the code so that you can go through it, run each query separately so that you can understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. The other thing I want to do real quickly is show you how you might do this with subqueries. So if I go back into SQL, I've already created a view called sales name average. So all I did was drag in the sales table. I dropped in name and sales. I hit the group by button, and then I said to average. And what that does, that gives us our first select statement and the average for that. So if I wanted to do a really like a nested query, but using Query Analyzer, as long as I have this guy saved, which I do, it's going to tell me I don't because I changed the format of it. And let's see, if I go to a new view and I pull in a view, now I can do a view of a view, right? So I've got this guy with an average sales by name. Let me just run it wide open here. So here's the view with the data. Now, if I go in here and hit average of the average, so we're just going to say group by, and we're going to take off name, and I'm going to just say, give me the average for that guy and run it. There's our nested query. 163.85. If I go back here, that is this number right here, which is the average of the averages of the name. All right, so nested query, you can use SQL text, type it all out in the query editor, or you can use the query designer. Either way, it takes more than one query to get to the answer that you're asking. Therefore, you've got to use subqueries or nested queries to get there. Hey, I hope you have a great day. And if you've liked this video, thought it was helpful, would you like it, share it, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Y'all take care now.